Hello everyone, I'm Nicola Haskell, the Principal of the Grove Education Centre, and I thought I would just quickly talk about our journey with the communication matrix. We started our journey identifying the barriers to learning at the Grove Education Centre. So as a whole staff, we came up with behaviour and communication impacting our ability to teach a rigorous curriculum. From there, we identified some professional values that we as a staff would adhere to moving forward, and we came up with professional integrity, evidence-based, working collaboratively and being respectful. We began our journey really investigating how we could build capacity in staff to skill up with their knowledge of communication and AAC. We spent a significant amount of money on coaching and professional development. And there was a huge impact on our students, but the evidence around that came from anecdotal knowledge, feedback from families, feedback from teachers, and achievement of NEP goals. We really wanted a tool that could really clearly show the data sets and show specifically where each child was with their development around communication, and also the supports that we would need moving forward, what explicit instruction and how we could plan future goals. So we investigated some options and we came up with a communication matrix as a tool. Staff trialled it and we took on board the feedback from there. We found that it was very user-friendly, it wasn't that time-consuming, and it gave us some really explicit information for our students and how we could plan moving forward. Really considered how we could look at that tool as a whole. So how could we build in collaborative moderation? We have said professionally as a school that we wanted to build capacity within everyone, including our families, our SSOs, our service providers that support our school. So doing the collaborative moderation was a way that we could all have a common language and we could really look at each student individually and look at their progress and come up collaboratively with a level of the communication matrix, and then work from there with the communication PLC on strategies to support that student moving forward.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides. But the matrix gives us 7 levels of communication, and we're then putting each of the kids in the school in a group from 1 to 7. And you see that on the communication matrix data wall just inside that door over there. And they have 4 reasons to communicate, or functions. These are the 7 levels. At the top. Last year, Edward was scored a 6. As a group, we decided we couldn't score him a 7 because he still had some gaps. But we decided it was unfair to score him as a 5 because he's got so many skills at a 6 and a 7. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So for each kid, we're going to agree on a number, and Claire is going to record that number. Okay, so this is Edward this year. Lovely progress. Wow. Woo-hoo. What number?
6 or 7.
I've heard 7. Yep, heaps of emerging skills. Stoked with that one. Go team.
Oh, it's behind through.
So,
Couldn't put him higher than a 3, though. It'd have to be 4 or 3. You couldn't put him higher. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we have to leave him at a 3, which doesn't reflect all the beautiful changes. She's a 6. Yep. Anyone want to argue? Please speak up if you differ. 6 for Taylor. Jacob? She communicates 2.
Yeah, that made a big difference.
So, yeah. 3. Massive jump.
Absolutely.
Yep, huge jump. So what do you guys want to do?
3. Oh, promoter.
3? Well, we gave her a 1 last time.
Oh, yeah.
2 or 3? She's still got a gap at 3. 2? It's requesting new objects. And some of that stuff will happen more as she learns her pod better, because at the moment she doesn't have a strategy to request something that's not straight around to her. So she's got to learn to initiate with her pod. Yeah.
Data wall was really about having accountability for all of our staff and the whole school community, having an accessible space to see where every student was at and to really celebrate success. It's a really simple tool. For instance, you can walk past before you're going on yard duty and you might see a certain student has got a gap in asking social questions, for instance, and when you go out on yard duty, you might make a real effort to enjoy a reciprocal conversation, encouraging those skills from that child.
We value our students as competent, capable communicators, and this is one of the reasons why I do really like the communication matrix, because I feel that it values and respects all types of multimodal communication, ranging from different AAC, verbal speech, to natural gestures.
The communication matrix is a really effective tool for teachers to assess any communication gaps with their students. It's also a really important tool for planning and designing any, explicit learning tasks around any communication functions that they might need support with. It's also really good for planning with your one planned goals.
Communication matrix, a very useful tool in the armoury of information about a student. It adds to the student profile, and particularly around communication, which I think is an area that teachers before haven't had a lot of standardised information about. We perhaps think we know where a student is at in their communication, but we're just not quite sure. So that profile that comes from the communication matrix allows us to see where the student is and plan accordingly. So for example, we have an activity in our classroom called I've Had Chat in the morning, and we say hello and we talk about the weather and what you had for breakfast and the weekend and all sorts of things, even Shrek and the students' favourite TV shows. And some of that information comes from the communication matrix, those aspects of communication that they still need some support and modelling to master.
Teachers here at the Grove use the communication matrix to inform our practice. This is an example of one of my students, Bentley. As you can see, I've assessed Bentley is not currently using questions throughout the day in natural context, so that's something that we are very intentionally modelling with Bentley. So we use a strategy during shared reading called Comment, Ask, Respond to model some of those questions. We're quite intentional throughout Bentley's play that we model a lot of questions to him. One of the things that I really like about us using the matrix here at the Grove is that as we use it as baseline data, so this is Ibrahim's results from last year, and then we can see the progress as he's developed his communication across all the functions, which is very exciting for us to see. Last year we had a strong focus on Ibrahim's social communication functions, so that includes greeting people, sharing, directing someone's attention. So we quite heavily modelled that quite intentionally through, again, his play, through his structured activities within those natural contexts, like when we go for excursions or in the play yard. And that's something that Ibrahim has definitely made progress with since, so that's very exciting to see.